friend, are you thinking about using quotes from other people in your book? If so, you need to stick around for this video because I'm going to tell you my 5 rules of thumb for whether or not you need permissions and how to get them. My name's Kelly Notaras. I'm the founder of KN Literary Arts. We are your one-stop shop, getting you from wherever you are now to having a book in your hand. So please visit us at knliterary.com. I also bring 25 years of U.S. publishing industry wisdom to this channel for free. So please hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you never miss a video. So today I'm talking about something that might sound boring, but I have to say it's one of the most often asked questions that we get at KN Literary. Am I allowed to use quotes in my book? And if so, how do I do it? So I'm going to walk you through the 5 rules of thumb. The issue here is that there is not any sort of set legal standard, and different publishers will tell you different things about what they are willing to do, where their risk tolerance stands. In my first year of publishing, I ran straight into the monster of permissions in such a big way I thought I was going to lose my job. I was putting through an anthology that had landed on my desk. No other editor at the house wanted it after the editor who acquired it had left, so they gave it to this baby assistant and told me to shepherd it through to publication. I loved every minute of it. It was super fun, except that I could not get the author, the person who was compiling the anthology, to get me that one last permission. I had written permission for every single essay in the anthology except for one. At the 11th hour, we decided, me and the managing editorial department, that since that essay had previously been published in a very major publication, we thought it was going to be okay. The author was assuring me this guy was his friend, no problem at all printing it. He just can't get a hold of him. He's so busy. We all thought probably that was true. He was a very well-known author, the person who was the author of that essay. So we're like, okay, you probably just can't get a hold of him. I'm sure it's fine. The books get printed. They come in. I send a copy to each of the people who had contributed. By that time, I could not get the guy who compiled the anthology on the phone. I couldn't get the address for this very famous person who we printed his previously printed essay. So I sent it to his agent. The minute the agent got it, he called me screaming and said he was going to sue me. He was going to sue the author. He was going to sue the publisher because they had absolutely not given permission for this essay to be included. And this essay was going to be the centerpiece of a full-length book that this author was writing the next year. What I saw in hindsight was that maybe my author and this guy were actually friends and that the guy didn't want to say no, so he just didn't respond. When I finally, in a really panic, got that author on the phone, he said, I left a message on this guy's answering machine and I told him if I didn't hear back from him, I was just going to print it. Okay, so number one thing I want to say, not hearing back from someone about a permission is not tacit approval to include it. And ultimately, the tragedy was that that book that so many of us had worked so hard on, we pulped 10,000 copies of it. So I don't want that to happen to you or anyone that you know. So I want you to follow these guidelines. Okay, so 2 things I need to say before I give you the guidelines. Number 1, I am not a lawyer. And in fact, you cannot use what I'm telling you here as like legal protection over what you do. If you want absolute airtight legal protection over including quotes, you want to talk to an intellectual property lawyer who specializes in book publishing. There are lots of them out there. They will review it, not for that much money, maybe an hour of their time. So I would say it's worth the investment if you're concerned. Number 2, in every case I'm about to present you to, you must attribute the quote completely. That means you need to say who said it, and you need to give the name of the publication or where you heard it. Okay? It doesn't have to be an official citation at the end of the book. It can just say inside of the chapter, in Kelly's YouTube video titled XYZ, she said blah, blah, blah. Okay? Or she said, quote, this, if you want to use my actual words, okay? So in any case here, paraphrasing might be something you also have to get permission for, or it might be something that you can use to not have to get permission. So you'll hear in these 5 rules of thumb where paraphrasing comes in. But you do need to attribute every single quote that you include so that the person who said it gets the credit, right? If they don't get the credit, then it's just ungenerous, right? So you need to do that. And they're going to be more likely to be upset with you if you don't give them credit. So give them credit. Okay, starting with my first rule of thumb. If you're quoting prose from a book, you can quote up to 400 words. Now, some people are going to argue about this. Some people will say it's less, 300 words. Other people will say it's more. In my publishing journey, I always have heard from traditional publishers I've worked for, 400 words or less is considered to be in the public domain. Now, sure, it's possible that if you use it in a way that the author doesn't like, where it makes them set in an unflattering light, they may still try to come after you for that. But I would say in general, it's pretty safe. I would probably use less than that. If I were writing a book and quoting, I might say I'm not going to include more than 100 words of someone's book. But this is what we're talking about here. Prose from a book, meaning just straight text from a book, absolutely no more than 400 words attributed well. An alternate you can do is still attribute where you got these ideas, but to paraphrase instead of putting the actual words on the page. You have a little bit more leeway if you're paraphrasing than if you're writing the actual words transcribed from their book. Transcribed from their book, 400 words. Paraphrasing, what we say is don't paraphrase more than 10% of one of their books. Meaning that if they have 10 chapters and you want to tell the main thrust of one of the chapters, only do one chapter. Don't do more than that, okay? So don't come into a chapter in your book where you're going through the 10 principles that author has in their book. Then you're basically giving away all their content, and potentially they could make a claim that you're getting in the way of them having readers. So no more than 10% of their ideas in a given publication should go into your book if you're paraphrasing. But you can paraphrase an entire chapter of their book, not just 400 words, because you're not using the word for word transliteration. All right? My second rule of thumb is about song lyrics and poetry. This is dicey territory. And I say this because so many of my authors want to start their whole book with their favorite poem or want to start every chapter with a line from their favorite song. I always say it's not worth it. I generally say try to leave out all poetry and all song lyrics. And the reason for this is that what's considered in the public domain, and again, people can sue you whether or not it's considered in the public domain because there is no official law around using it. And that makes it dicey for you, okay? But I would say in general, the publishers I've worked for in the past would allow one single line from a poem. One line. Now, how do you know what's one line? You have to go to the printed publication of that poem, wherever it has been copyrighted. That's usually in a book, but sometimes nowadays it could be on an Instagram post, and you have to see how the author laid out the text. So if one line might be one word, right? It could be like this, next line, sunset in my heart. I'm making this up as we go along. You then can't use this sunset in my heart and consider it one line. That's two lines. Okay. So it just gets down to such a nitty gritty place that I would suggest not doing it at all. It is rarely going to be worth it for you. If you want to use, if you're like, my whole book is structured with every chapter, one line from this song, I have to do it, then you must get permission. And the way you get permission is to go to the website of the copyright holder. This is very rarely the author of the song. This is very rarely the person who sang it. It's the publisher who put it out in the world. So it's the record label, for example. Unless the person is like a YouTube or TikTok star and they haven't been published yet, then you need to reach out to them directly. But for 99% of the time that you would want to be using a song or a poem, you need to go to the book. Let's see, I'll use this book. It's my friend Amber's book, Infinite Impact. You would go here and you would look at the copyright page, and you would see who the person is that published it, what publishing company published it, and you go to their website. On their website, guaranteed, they're going to have a permission section where they will have probably a form that you need to fill out that will walk you through everything they want to know about your book, how many copies you're selling, how you're publishing it, how long the book is, etc. And then you will submit it. 4 to 6 weeks later, you will hear back from them with a price, and they will tell you to include the poem in your book. It's going to be $600. Okay, so you have to dedicate time for that, 4 to 6 weeks, and you're not going to push these people to go faster. They're usually a huge company and they're getting hundreds of these requests a day. So you have to bake that into your schedule. And secondly, you're not going to be able to negotiate them on the price. They're going to tell you what it is, and you have to decide for yourself, is it worth it? For some people it is, for other people it's definitely not. In general, I would say if you're going to self-publish your book, it's not worth it. Leave out all song lyrics, all poetry. Your readers will never know. Third rule of thumb around permissions is, what do I do if I found this quote somehow in social media? Like the person said it on a podcast, or I saw it on their Instagram, or whatever it might be. In that case, I would reach out directly to that author. In general, anyone who's an influencer, who's on a podcast, or has an Instagram, or a TikTok, or whatever, there's a way you can get in contact with them. Whether it's sliding into their DMs on that site, or it's actually going to their website and filling out their contact form. Get in touch with them and see if they reply. If they do, they might just say, yeah, of course, go for it, use it. They might say, you know what, I'd rather you not. Okay, you got to, go with that. Or if you don't hear back, that's not tacit approval to use the quote, I would paraphrase instead. I would say, on XYZ podcast, I heard Kelly Notaras say, da, 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 and you put it in your own words. In that way, unless you are misrepresenting what I said in some way that I feel is unflattering to me or doesn't present me well, I'll actually maybe be happy. I'm like, oh, give me a little plug. Thanks for that. You always attribute it well and you put it into your own words. Fourth rule of thumb, what if you have interviewed a bunch of people for your book? Do you have to get permission to use their words in your book? My sense is absolutely yes. In that case, you know exactly where they live. You know how to get a hold of them because you interviewed them. Be sure they fill out what I would consider to be like a normal template permission form. You just send that to them via DocuSign or HelloSign, one of the signing apps online for ease, or you send it to them and ask them to print it out, sign it, and send you back a photo of it, but you keep that on file. I will tell you, if there's nothing that I learned from that terrible experience in my first year in publishing, please don't let this lesson be wasted. Always, always, always keep that on file for anyone that you interview or any content that you have gotten approval to include in the book. It is always just going to keep you in, the best legal clear. And my fifth rule of thumb is actually not about quotes specifically. This is if you're writing your own story or you're including a story in the book about, let's say, a client that you've worked with, or, God forbid, a parent who didn't treat you so well. Do you need to get permission from these people? So if it's a client and you want to use their real name or an anonymous name, but their actual words, and you want to use their likeness. What I mean by that is you want to describe them as they are. They were a woman who was married, who had 3 kids, who worked a job in corporate in New York City, or whatever it might be. If all of that is true, I would try to reach out to that client and get their permission to use it. If they could identify themselves in your description of themselves, you want their permission. If, on the other hand, you can make a composite character out of multiple clients and you're not using any one person's likeness or words, you're paraphrasing what was said, you're turning a woman into a man, or you're making somebody who is blonde into a redhead, or whatever it might be, you can do that and say at the beginning of the book that some characters in this book are composite to protect their privacy. Okay, so that's totally fine to do that. You just have to name it at the beginning of the book. And usually you can do that on the copyright page, no problem. If you're working with an editor, which you should be, they'll be able to tell you where exactly to put that if you're self-publishing the book. On to the more dicey question of the parent or a child or someone in your family who people in your surround are going to know who you're talking about. If you talk about my crazy ex-boyfriend, right? They're going to know exactly who you're talking about. In that case, there are 2 things I would suggest. Number 1 is if they're litigious in any way, I would absolutely get your book read by an intellectual property lawyer who specializes in book publishing. They'll be able to read the book and tell you whether any passages are going to be a legal issue for you. So what they're likely to do is to have you re-paraphrase what was said or what happened entirely through your own lens. So not to make any judgments about the other person, not to call them an abuser, for example, but to actually describe and take us into the scene where they abused you, where they hit you, and just say, I got hit, rather than saying they are X. You're just reporting the truth of what happened. That is your second protection. So number 1 is get that lawyer to review it. Number 2 is to stick to the truth. Your true rendering of what happened is your defense in court. So you need to make sure you're not embellishing it, you're not adding to it, you're not trying to make it look worse than it was, you're being exactly literal with what happened from your perspective, that you would actually get a clear lie detector test if somebody gave you one on what happened. Because that true replication of what happened is your only defense in court should this person be litigious. But again, going back to number 1, I think get a lawyer. You will be so happy you did down the line. You'll be in the clear because nothing will be said that could be, considered libelous and take you to court. So that's everything I know about permissions. Again, I'm sorry that it's not so cut and dried. There are definitely some sort of gray areas when it comes to this work, but it is worth learning these basic rules of thumb so that you can move forward and feel confident that your book is going to be in the clear when you put it into the world. And if you have any questions at all, absolutely go see a lawyer. I am not responsible for anything I said ultimately ending up with you getting into some sort of trouble. Always, always, always consult a lawyer if you are concerned. Happy writing.